Hello guys, I hope everybody's having a great day. It is now 3:30 in the morning, and a lot of times when I can't sleep, I either get up and watch television or I pray or I read. And I want to share something with you this morning. It's an article I had read from a lady by the name of Sierra Brunei, and she is a financial manager for a startup company, and she serves as the treasurer for her local congregation, and she lives outside Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. She talks about a flight she took from Bangkok, from Tokyo to Bangkok in 2016, where the airline central computer system had failed, and all the flights had been grounded worldwide. And for several hours, 7 hours to be exact, later they had been given permission to take off, but the captain announced that a typhoon had moved into their flight path, and they had to reroute 650 miles to the south, and also share with them that the flight would be a little bumpy. But she talks about how it turned out that, in her estimation, the flight turned out to be more than a little bumpy. And she described the scene very differently, that the sound of things moving about, the vibrations, the plane was shaking, and everything was being moved around throughout the plane. And she wanted to sleep, but her mind kept racing quite naturally about what could happen in the midst of a typhoon at 35,000 feet. She closed her eyes and she said she began praying for safety and rest. But she thought of another scene as she prayed, and that was the scene with Jesus and disciples in the Bible, Mark 4:40. And she started thinking about the words that Christ shared with his disciples. She heard Christ's words to his disciples, and she felt as if it was speaking directly to her. And the question was, when Jesus asked the disciples, "Why are you afraid?" So the verse talks about, in Mark 4:40, she talks about the word still. Why are you afraid? Why are you still afraid? Have you still no faith? Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? And she thought about the word still, and she felt that it implies that in some way there had been previous scenarios in which faith should have developed. Times Jesus had proven himself worthy of their trust. Yet, even in the midst of trial, the Almighty had been forgotten. She reminds us that Christ still calls us to remember how he has led, cared for, and blessed us along the way. And during the turbulent times when we're faced with difficulties like she was on the plane, she said that she had trusted the engineers, the pilots, and the machines rather than the one who upholds the universe by the word of his power. Hebrews 1:3. But then she remembered Christ's words to his disciples and his words to her. I felt him reminding me of who he was, Lord of all, and only then did she fall into a peaceful sleep. She remembered Christ's words to the disciples and his words to her and his words to us. I felt him reminding me of the one who was Lord of all. Only did she fall into a peaceful sleep, and only can we fall into a peaceful sleep. Do we sometimes, in the midst of trial, we've all had these experiences. We have all faced situations that seem insurmountable. At times, overwhelmed by discouragement and despair, We reach out trying to grab hold on a situation solution, trying to find a solution. We often pour all our trust into money, medicine, education, relationships, or our own recovery plan, how we can fix it. We trust in our own strength and fight until we have exhausted every effort and are overcome with weariness. And you know, at this moment, the greatest weakness Satan seeks to slow distrust and belief in our hearts. At this very time when we're at our lowest, he seeks to sow distrust and belief in our hearts. We doubt that God sees our suffering, and we doubt that he hears our prayers. Just as the disciples in the boat, we lose sight of a Father who watches over us and cares for our every need. We also know that in scriptures, the heroes of faith and their testimonies of endurance and overcoming trial and tribulation. Take Abraham, Jacob, Elijah, and Job. These men inspire us to greater heights. We hear wonderful testimony. We also hear wonderful testimony from friends and family after they have overcome great trials. And just as the Israelites sang after crossing the sea, they can clearly see God's leading as they look back. But what are the testimony of those still experiencing trials? How do they relate to God? How are they allowing their faith to be molded right now at this very moment? For every hero of faith, the Bible also record times of doubt and weakness, relying on ourselves, and how the men of old had doubts and weaknesses and relied on themselves. Abraham lied, Jacob feared, Elijah fled, and Job even questioned God. But Christ, the author and finisher of our faith, led them to depend on him. He promised that for every trial, he will make a way of escape, that we may be able to bear it. 1 Corinthians 10:13, he makes a way of escape, that we may be able to bear it. We all can experience the same faith and dependence. These things were not written merely that we might read and wonder what prophets and men of old did, but that the same faith which wrought in God's servants of old might work in us, in no less marked a manner than he wrought then will he work now, whenever there are hearts of faith through the channels of his power. Read that again. But that the same faith which wrought in God's servants of old might work in us, in no less marked manner than he wrought, then will he work in present time, whenever there are hearts of faith will be channeled to his power. When we channel ourselves, our faith, and our hearts to him, for he is a channel. He is that power that we must channel, get our source of energy from. The very fact that we are called to experience trials can bring a sense of peace. Man is born unto trouble. As the sparks that fly upward, we all gonna go to trouble. Let us remember that he has faith in us to endure. Our trials become heavenly commentations of our faith. I know that I have gone through a lot of trials, just like Sierra did. And I don't always have peace. Some days I do, some days I don't. Other days, I feel more resigned to the fact that I am not the one in control. So we all gonna have to come to the realization and the fact that we are not the one in control. We must learn that after self-reliance has failed, we resort to faith and finally remember Jesus and his constant care. Sierra wanted us to remember something. She said often when she slept through the turbulence, it reminded her that I can testify of perfect peace while every nerve is strained to the utmost. And we all, after we go through the turbulence, our trials and our tribulations, and after we find that perfect peace in the midst of a storm, we should, and we are required to encourage others with our testimony. Not only once the trial is over, but as we wrestle in the moment. In the midst of trial, that knowledge of how the Father has led in our past informs our present faith. We can share and encourage others with what we are learning, how our faith is developing, and how God is working with us. And we, as witnesses for Christ, we are to tell what we know, what